So we'll start in child's pose today, bringing our toes together, knees are wide. Arms will come out in front of us, and we'll just let the chest sink down. Release the head onto our mat. Breathe deeply. Let your thoughts come inward. And start listening to what our body is saying. Now with our arms out in front of us, let's open the fingers really, really wide and just place each individual finger down into our mat. Press those buddies in and just kind of lift from the center. So just the edges of our hands are pressing. Pull those shoulders away. Make our arms long. Good. And then inhale, keeping those knees really wide. Toes are touching. We'll bring the shoulders forward into a little bit of a froggy pose here. Let the hips sink down. Lengthen in our spine. And then exhale. Let's press those hips back. And inhale, we'll come forward. And exhale back. Inhaling forward. And exhaling back. One more time. Let's come on forward. Lengthen in the spine. Tilt that pelvis, opening up the low back, and then also letting those hip flexors lengthen. And then we'll let those toes come apart, and we'll bring the knees underneath of our hips into a tabletop. Right here, hands are underneath of our shoulders. Knees are under our hips, toes are tucked. Let's press into those hands and toes and just barely lift the knees up off of the ground. And then lower them back down. And we'll press the hips back so we can flex those feet a little bit more. Good, keeping that long back. Shoulders come over those hands and lift the knees just the tiniest a bit, couple of inches. Get those shoulders working and then lower the knees. Press the hips back in toward those heels. Good, and back to our tabletop. Nice neutral spine. Good. Let's lengthen that right leg back behind us. Toes are pointing down toward our mat. And then think about keeping that low back open as best we can. We're not dropping our tummy. We're actually lifting just the tiniest a bit. Good. And now let's bend the knee and take it out to the side. Puppy at the fire hydrant. And then lengthen behind us. And then bend out to the side. Good. Lengthen behind us. And then out to the side. Good. One more time. Lengthen behind us. And now this time, let's step all the way forward into a baby lunge. Toes are to the outside of our pinky here on the right side. Hips are sinking. Chests are raising. Good. And now as we exhale, let's bring the hips over this left knee, lengthen in that right leg for a half split. Inhale, we'll come forward. Exhale, let's come back to that half split. Let's keep our left hand on our blocker, on the floor, and we'll lift up the right hand. Do a little twist here in our half split. And then exhale, we'll come back down. Inhale, forward into our lunge. And then raising those hands up high. Good. Exhale, hands come back down. Let's step back all the way to child's pose. Take a breath here. Let's inhale, shoulders come up. Exhale, slowly lower down. And then inhale, let's scoop that chest up into our cobra. And then we'll press back to our child's pose. And then we'll find ourselves back in our tabletop. Let's tuck those toes, flex the feet, press into our fingers and into our knees, long spine, strong shoulders. Good. And now let's lift the knees up just a little bit. And then exhale, lower down and press the hips back towards our heels. Get those ankles and feet. Good. And then back to our tabletop. Strong tummy as we lift those knees up off of the floor. And lowering down, pressing back. And tabletop. One more time, let's lift those knees. Wake up that core a little bit. And then we'll lower the knees back down. And when we're ready, we'll extend the left leg back behind us. Turning the hips so that they are flat. Our toes are pointing down toward the ground. Just reach back there with that left heel. Good. And then when we're ready, bending the knee, bringing it out to the side. And then out, back behind us. Good. And then to the side. And then out behind us. And to the side. And lengthening. Good. One more time. Out to the side. And then one more time, lengthen. And then stepping that leg all the way forward. And we'll find our lizard pose on this side. Little baby lunge. Good. And now let's walk those hands back. Find our half split here. So our hips are over this right knee. Our left toes are pointing up to the sky. And let's turn so that the tail begins to point behind us instead of underneath. Good. Let's inhale, coming back to our lunge. And then exhale, half split. And now let's leave that right hand planted and lift up the left. A little twist. Good. And then lowering the hand down. We'll come on forward into our lunge. Once we get all set up, we'll inhale, lift the hands up for a crescent lunge here. And then exhale, hands will come back down. We'll step all the way back to child's pose. Take a breath. Inhale up to a little plank. Exhale, we'll lower down. And then inhale to a little cobra here. And then press back all the way to our child's pose. Good. Let's tuck the toes underneath of our butts, pressing into our hands, into our toes. Let's lift the hips up off of our heels. Begin to pedal our feet. And we'll settle our way into a downward facing dog, pulling the shoulders back. And together, lifting the tail, pressing into the hands, into the toes. And then we can begin to lengthen in those legs as we press the heels down in toward the mat. Good. Let's lift up the right leg. And we'll bring the knee into our chest, stepping in between our fingers for a lunge. Good. Finding our balance here, let's lift those hands up for a high lunge. And now let's turn toward the right, opening our arms up wide for a little twist. And then inhale back up to our high lunge. And then we'll lower that left knee down into a half lunge here. Sinking the hips down. And now let's bring those hands together above our head. We can interlace our fingers or just pray them together. Good. And now let's tilt over to the right. And inhale back up. And then exhale. Let's lower those hands down in between or inside of that right foot. We'll keep the right hand on the floor and we'll open up again for a little twist, lifting the left hand up. And then exhaling back down. Let's tuck that left toe back behind us and we'll step back for a downward facing dog. Lift up that left leg. Three-legged dog. Good. Bringing the knee into the chest, shifting forward, stepping in between those hands for our lunge. Once we get settled here, let's inhale to our high lunge. And then exhale, we'll twist to the left, opening the arms wide, dropping the shoulders, lengthening all along our spine. And also in this back leg. Good, back up to the top. And then we'll lower down that right knee, coming down into our half lunge here, sinking those hips low, lifting the heart. And then we can bring those hands together. If we would like to interlace those fingers, we sure can. And then as we exhale, let's just tilt those shoulders over to the left. Still reaching with the hands, sinking the hips, opening up that side body. And then inhaling back up. And then hands come down to our mat, to the inside of that left foot. When we're ready, left hand will stay on the floor, right hand lift up to the sky. And then we'll lower that right hand back down, tuck that right toe, and we'll step back for a downward facing dog. Good. Let's lift up that right leg. We'll step forward in between our hands and bring the hands up to the sky and open ourselves up. Warrior two. Good. Let's lengthen that right leg. Shift the hips back behind us. Reach forward. And we'll lower that right hand down for triangle pose. Good. Now let's lower the left hand down. Both hands can come down to the mat ever so briefly. We're going to switch, so our left hand will stay on the floor. Right hand comes up for twisted or revolved triangle. Good. And then lowering that right hand down, we can bend the knee, lift the heel up back behind us, and we'll step all the way back to three-legged dog. Bend the knee, bring it into our chest, and we'll come into our pigeon. So lowering that right knee behind its matching wrist, flexing the foot, and then softening the left foot back behind us. But then let's pull that left hip forward, pull the right hip back so that they meet in the middle, even and level. And from here, if we're happy, we can stay on our hands. We can walk them forward and lower down onto our elbows. And maybe eventually all the way down into a full fold. And when we're ready, we'll inhale, bringing those hands back underneath of our shoulders if they are not already there. And then we'll bend that left knee. We'll reach back with our left hand. Try and pull that buddy forward in towards our butt. Get that quad. And then we have the choice to stay here, or if we would like, maybe challenge ourselves by coming back down into the fold. Still holding on to that quad stretch. And then we'll release that left leg. We'll tuck the toe, find our hands underneath of our shoulders, and then we'll step all the way back to downward facing dog. Give ourselves a wiggle here. Shake out that right leg if we need. Good. And then settle into our downward facing dog when we're ready. Lift up that left leg on the inhale. And we'll bend the knee, step forward in between our hands. And then we'll open ourselves up, warrior two on this side, lowering that right heel down, bending the left knee, lifting the heart, dropping the shoulders. Good. And now let's lengthen in that left leg, shift the hips back, reach forward.
And then find ourselves in triangle pose. Good, and now let's lower that right hand down and we'll swap with the left and find revolved triangle. And now let's lower down that left hand. We'll bend the left knee, lift the heel up off of the right, and then we'll step all the way back for three-legged dog. And then we'll bring the knee in, shifting forward, setting ourselves up for pigeon on this side, lowering that left knee down behind its wrist, softening the right leg, evening out our hips. Breathing deeply. We'll gradually work our way down into whatever variation of the pose we are in the mood for today. Let's do one more big breath here. Inhaling deeply. Exhaling completely. When we're ready, inhaling, bring those hands back underneath of our shoulders. And then we'll bend that right leg. We'll reach back with our hand. Gather up those toes. Bring the heel in towards our butt. And if we would like, we can even return back to our fold. And we'll release that foot. Tuck the toe. Hands are underneath of our shoulders, pressing back into our downward facing dog. Give it a wiggle and a waggle, a pedal and a stretch. And then with tiny little baby steps, we're going to begin to walk, pressing our entire foot down into our mats as we come forward towards our hands, settling into a forward fold here. Good, let's bend those knees so deeply. We'll place our hands palms up underneath of our feet so that our toes touch the crease of our wrist. We press into those toes. We drop the head. And then we begin to lengthen in our legs, using the connection between our hands and our feet to help us deeper into the fold. We're helping and not forcing our body into this fold. Begin to shift the weight in towards our toes. And then let's bend those knees. We'll release the hands. And then we'll open up those feet a little bit wider than our hips. We'll lower our butts down into a malasana squat. Good. Let's lower those hands down to the mats. We can bring the knees down. And then let's find our bolster. Place that bolster long ways on our mats, right out in front of our knees. One hand on either side. We're just going to swish those knees over to one side and sit down onto the hip. So my knees went over to the right. So I'm sitting on my left hip here. We're going to pull that bolster all the way up against the hip here. And then center our chest over our cushion and then begin to lower it down. Release the hands into a cactus arms. We can rest our opposite cheek or the same side cheek onto our bolster. Find where we're at today. This little twisty, supported position. Let's close our eyes and just breathe. And then we deepen our breath. We start to unwind by bringing our gaze back towards the same side as our knees. Our hands come to either side of that cushion as we press ourselves back up. And we'll come to our tabletop, just right over that bolster. Let's give ourselves a couple of cats and cows. And then when we have sufficiently catted and cowed ourselves, we'll turn over to the other hip. So my knees will go over to the left. I'll sit down on my right hip. And again, scoot that bolster all the way up against that hip. And then center our chest over the bolster. And then lower ourselves down. Take a few breaths. And then if we would like, we can move our gaze away from our knees to bring that twist all the way up toward our cervical spine as well. And again, we can close our eyes and just focus on our breathing. Do not need to keep ourselves supported. That is what the bolster and the earth is for. So we can just relax into this pose. Let's deepen our breath. We can unwind in the neck at first, bringing our gaze back towards our knees. Hands will come to either side of our bolster. We'll press our chest up. And then we can unwind those legs. And again, a few cats and cows here. And now, keeping that bolster where it's at, we're just going to turn ourselves around and bring our butts right up against it. We'll sit on the ground, bolster is up against us, and then we'll just roll our way down, one vertebra at a time. Our knees can be bent at this point if we would like. We'll let those shoulders just melt to either side of our cushion. Our head is supported. Our legs can stay bent here, or if we would like, we can straighten them out, or we can open up our knees and place our feet together in a bound angle pose. Whatever we do, we find ourselves super comfortable and 100% supported so that we don't have to do anything. We close our eyes. We soften in our jaw. We unfurrow our brow. We just allow ourselves this time to rest and to heal. And when we're ready, it may not be right now, that's fine. We'll begin to deepen our breath. And bring small movement back into our body. We slowly come back into our space. Bend the knees and place our feet back onto our mats. And then we'll slowly roll over onto our side, lowering ourselves down off of our bolster. And then we'll help ourselves up to seated. We'll do another little check-in with ourselves to see how we're feeling. After moving around a little bit, and after not moving around. We'll bring our hands together at our hearts. Give ourselves a little thanks for all of the gifts that we just gave us. The light and the divine in me recognizes and respects the light and the divine in you. And wherever I may go, I keep a little piece of you in my heart. Namaste. Thank you very much, my love.
Thank you. Thank me. That was brilliant. Thank you.